There we are. There I am. Okay. Hey, hello everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome again. You know what's going on Thursdays. If you were here before, you know that we did not prepare anything. We answer your questions. So start typing your questions and we'll do our best to answer them, right? And the questions can be about anything, like DevOps, SRE, Kubernetes, cloud, AI, I don't know, service mesh, whatever you want. And likely answer might be, we have no idea, but we'll see. Anyways, type your questions. I see that Martin is already here with us. Hey, Martin. So usually there are a bunch of questions. What are you doing lately, Scott? Let's break the ice while waiting.
I've been working.
I heard that you're going to have to prepare to teach a couple of hundred people at once, all alone.
Exactly. Getting ready for 4 sessions at KubeCon this year, which will be fun. So anyone coming out to KubeCon, come meet us, me, Victor, around in the hallway track, or both of us have some sessions, and both of us will be found with alcohol in our hands in the afternoons and evenings and mornings. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, you are almost certainly going to see us at night in a bar or somewhere, and we might come to KubeCon the next morning. That's
exactly.
That's the gist of it.
Exactly. It should be fun. But no, been doing a bunch of backstage and cross-plane stuff, and yeah, mostly
Okay.
obviously MCP AI.
From I'm going to give it a try. Rajasilan, maybe. Who knows? Anyways, what is your advice for a full stack Kubernetes home lab? I don't use anything that is not cloud, so I think that this is going to be on you, Scott.
Yeah, so again, for testing things out locally, I use Kind when it's a throwaway cluster. When it comes to actually setting up a full home lab, it really depends on what you have. If you're talking about doing this on like Raspberry Pis and just going like cheap and just trying to like figure something out, do Raspberry Pis, try something like Talos, set stuff up easy. It's awesome. It's quick, and secure and fun to play with. If you have a full home lab where it's not just Kubernetes, you have something like vSphere or Proxmox or something in that sort, definitely go down the cluster API approach, and use the relevant cluster API provider. If you have the money to pay for distributions, which people don't in home labs, that's a whole nother story. And if you're just looking, I can just do raw cluster API in my mind. I don't see the value in any of the really, let's say, open source distros above it that much. So cluster API or Talos would be my recommendation. And
But,
yeah,
I cannot imagine a situation in which you would pay for distribution for your home lab. Okay, I'm going to double the budget. Half of the budget goes to.
So the only use case that I've seen where people sometimes like, I happen to be fortunate in certain cases as well, and I know a bunch of people that like when you work for a company that uses a specific distribution, if you have a good relationship with that distributor, sometimes you can get like an NFR license or something to run in a home lab for dev where you don't get support, but you can run the same thing that you're doing at work, and that way you can prepare and learn things and whatever. Another thing that you can do is most of the vendors, for example, like SpectroCloud does have trial periods. And so do I think D2IQ, which is now NKP from Nutanix, right? And you could take them, if you don't mind recreating an environment every 90 days or every 30 days, depending on the vendor, try it out. You have a home lab, that's where you should be trying things and breaking things, because nothing critical is running there. So play around, mess with things. If you need stable, just do cluster API.
Yeah, I wonder actually how many people have home labs that are permanent. Because I imagine, I don't have a home lab, but I imagine if I would have a home lab, that would be something I would be creating and destroying all the time. Kind of like not something where I would actually host, I don't know, my video collection or something like that, right?
Right. So I have both, right? I do have 2 Pis sitting on the side with like Pi-hole and a few things on there that are always running, that I always want up in my environment. And then the rest of it, though, a bunch of Intel nukes, a bunch of, additional Raspberry Pis, things like that. There I'm carrying things up and down all the time because it's just fun.
Okay. Oh, from Florin, bicep of Terraform for strictly Azure. Before
it has to be one of them.
First of all, let me start by saying I don't think it's ever strictly one thing, because sooner or later you will get to using GitHub maybe with those tools, or Datadog or something. There is always something else. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's really only Azure. And I will say out of the bat that if those are the only 2 options, I still choose Terraform. Bicep does not rub well on me.
Yeah. So it's not that Bicep doesn't sit well with me. I'm fine with Bicep. My issue with Bicep is that it offers no additional value in my mind over HCL and Terraform, and therefore I don't understand why another DSL. It's not that I have something wrong with Bicep. If Bicep was there before Terraform, before HCL, I would say the Bicep format, great. Whatever. Just like people said with HCL. The issue is it offers no tangible benefit in my mind over HCL and Terraform, and the de facto standard is Terraform, and therefore I see no legitimate reason why someone should use Bicep ever.
That was why, actually, that's what I had in mind when I said doesn't sit well. It's simply, I could never make myself truly dive deep into Bicep without understanding why it exists. I can dig dive into anything, but there must be a reason for that. I don't know, like cluster API, right? I'm going to dig dive because this is something different. I'm using it as an example. It can be anything else, but
Exactly.
I need to have a motivation to even contemplate learning something new.
Right.
Some
like
motivation.
When you learned KCL, there was a tangible benefit that KCL brought to the table that made you learn KCL to do it. The same thing for me with YTT from Carvel. The same thing happened with Q for people, and I didn't see the tangible benefit in Pickle, so I never went with Pickle, right? Like, I tried it, I tested, okay, didn't see the tangible benefit, and I left it, right? All of these things, you have to see where the value is, and Bicep, it's a bit nicer than HCL, I'll give it that. It is a bit easier to read or grok than HCL. A bit, not a lot, though. And losing out on that entire ecosystem for that tiny little benefit is not worthwhile.
It almost reminds me in a way that, and I know this is not exactly, but I have somehow similar feelings about WASM, right? Like those benefits. And when I say similar feelings, I mean the last thing that you said, I feel that if I would be jumping into it deeper than I did, I would be missing on so many things, right? And then I need to weigh that in. Is it better than containers? Let's say it is. Is it this much better than everything I'm missing?
Right.
Not really.
Exactly. It's not enough of a benefit to lose out on the ecosystem than the current dominating technology is, right? Which is WASM is better than containers from a security perspective, from everything. If this was day zero and you had WASM and containers, WASM would have won. But the fact is today, we're in the world where containers are the de facto standard. And therefore, WASM can't ever reach, in my mind, will never reach, most likely, the status that containers have reached. It is going to keep growing in the web, where web assembly was built for, and for specific use cases. But as a replacement for containers, I simply don't see that happening.
Exactly. And in this case, going back to the initial question, Bicep is not complementary to Terraform. It is a replacement, effectively, right? Okay, quick break. I got my alarm clock because I always forget. Sponsor Octopus is sponsoring this stream again. Thank you so much. This time it's not about discounts for the training or what's not what we did before. It's about you buying enterprise support for your Argo. And when I say Argo, I don't mean Argo CD. I mean Argo CD events, or what else is there? Workflows, and there is one more. Rollouts. There we go. Right. So anything Argo.
It says it right on the screen. So yeah.
Oh, I have a tiny teleprompter here. I don't see it, man. I see only the logo. Anyways, if you're using Argo, any of the Argo projects or all of the Argo projects, check them out. They're the people who are involved in maintainers of the project. They know what they're doing. They give you support. You give them money. Everybody lives happily ever after. So check them out. It's octopus.com/support. And thank you, Octopus, for sponsoring this stream. We're gonna... Oh, that comes later. Anyways, where were we? Questions. Okay, what's next? Let's see.
From Shiva Prasad, yes.
Do you think agentic tool has better hand over infrastructure as code? Now, will infrastructure as code be gone or evolve? I don't think that one replaces the other. It's not one... I mean, you can say that do you think that agentic tool has a better hand than Joe in your company? Then I don't know. I don't know that person well. I cannot say, right? But I don't think that agents replace tools. I think that they complement people, right? Now, we are getting and we will be getting more and more agentic tools, right? But they are also going to, for those types of operations, those agentic tools are still going to use some kind of infrastructure as code, right? Now, when I say infrastructure as code, just not to confuse everybody in this context, I mean somehow to define infrastructure. Many people, when they say infrastructure as code, they mean Terraform. I do not necessarily mean Terraform or Bicep. They will have to work with infrastructure somehow, whether that's through Terraform, whether that's through Kubernetes API, whether that's directly through AWS API, and then write everything in JSON. That's to be decided. We'll see. Nobody knows where this will go a few years from now, right? But you somehow need to define. It cannot work on thin air. Neither agents, neither you nor anybody else, right?
I think that I completely agree. I think what we won't do as an industry, I think, and I really hope we don't do, is to throw out all the lessons that we have learned before agents, because agents are simply doing the tasks that humans were doing in many cases because out of necessity, and they're freeing us up to do other things, right? They're simply doing the process that we were doing anyways. You can do the research that ChatGPT does when it returns something to you. You could write the code that you're getting from Cursor or Copilot or whatever, and you can generate the infrastructure using something like Terraform. When agentic infrastructure as code comes into the place, it's just like we've talked about many times, where I believe that clicky UIs should never be applying something to a cluster. They should be pushing up to Git and then sync things down, because we don't want to throw out the idea of desired state and GitOps and version control and all that. The same thing I think goes with agents. Whether the agent needs the abstraction layer of Terraform HCL, or if it can be the payload of what goes directly to the AWS API or a cross-plane manifest or whatever, that is to be determined what that format is. But we are not going to move away from infrastructure as code in terms of its definitions of being version controlled, desired state, basic configuration of our infrastructure. That will always remain, because we can't let our infrastructure be hallucinated. So it needs to have, in the end, a desired state that gets actioned upon and that can be reconciled over time.
No, the only thing I would add, that does not mean that few years from now we will not see that those concepts stay, but they evolved and became very different, right? With every new hype or thing, we have a change that is happening. So you might not recognize it 3 years from now, but it will be conceptually that.
Right. It will be an evolution of that. We're not going to move back to the days of just an agent running an AWS CLI command and poof, done. Your EKS cluster is created with nothing stored anywhere, with no state, with no desired state, with no way of describing what was created or anything. There is going to be some level of a desired state somewhere stored. Whether Git is the right tool, I don't believe that Git was ever the right tool. It's just the tool that existed everywhere. Git is good for code, not for infrastructure, not for GitOps. All of these things, Git was simply there, and therefore it was used. But it's just like we had tools before Git, and Git was brought out because it was the better way to do code co-collaboration. The same thing is going to inevitably happen in the GitOps IAC world. We just have to wait and see what that's going to be, because there's been nothing invented in that area that I know of. Yeah.
Okay, next one from Minas. Kubernetes management cluster, do you go for just one or one for each different environment? I don't have the answer to that because outside of it depends, and probably on the scale, right? I know companies that have like dozens of management clusters, kind of like sometimes even it's high double digit, right? But that's very large scale.
Yeah.
And it also depends how paranoid people are. Sometimes kind of this team cannot see anything from any other team and no other team can see anything from any other team. And we are all paranoid and every team gets a management cluster that does something nobody knows why. You can go crazy.
Exactly. My general opinion is that you should, whether you are separating between, you should, as much as possible, separate between prod and staging in anything that can have a negative impact when you are doing the upgrades, right? Because what you don't want to be doing is upgrading something in staging that is now going to break your production, right? If you have the limitations, which are real in many companies, that you can't come up with the extra resources to deploy for staging. It doesn't make sense at your scale. It would be overpayment for different things. What I would do is, before any upgrade, spin up an environment, spin up a temporary management cluster and a temporary staging cluster to mimic your actual setup. Install the current setup, upgrade it, validate that everything works, then tear it down and upgrade the actual environment. But as much as you can separate production from staging, the better. Again, if you don't have the funds for it, you don't have the funds for it.
Not having funds for it, you're now touching on the concept of ephemeral environments, which I would argue that can be useful in any scale. And if you don't have a budget, you still have a budget to spin up a cluster, probably small cluster for 1 hour and shut it down. That's
right.
rarely
usually management clusters are not ephemeral, though, right? Usually you want a persistent.
I forgot that it's management cluster. Yes.
Right. You're not bringing up an ephemeral environment to manage your crossplane resources and then doing a Valero restore every time.
Yeah, you're right on that one. But you can still do what you said, the ephemeral environment, to check at least the upgrade of that management cluster.
Exactly. Right? So that's where it can come in for the testing, not for actual work in ephemeral things. But yeah, as much as you can separate, the better. I am very much against, though, over separation. Meaning, while I say that production from staging should be, you should not be over separating things, in which case all you're doing is anytime you split something, it's extra overhead. So don't go crazy with every single team in every single environment in every single region needs a separate management cluster, because then you end up with the situations of sometimes hundreds of management clusters. And then what you end up with is management clusters of the management clusters in a region. And then you have the management cluster of the management clusters of the regions. And then you end up like the hierarchies within companies. The boss is boss is boss is boss is boss, right? And in the end, that's where everything breaks. Don't add bureaucracy to your Kubernetes cluster structure.
Let me rephrase it. Don't complicate things on any level for anything unless you have to. And that includes management clusters. Just kind of go easy.
Exactly. And do not take, but this is how we do it, as a legitimate reason for needing it.
There is one exception. If you're an architect who is valued by how complicated diagrams you can make, then it's okay. Kind of do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, this one I'm not sure I understand. Florin, why is it not handling the state complicated?
Oh, I think it's related to Bicep versus Terraform and Terraform managing state.
Okay. Now, I was about to say, I thought application state is that's not complicated. What is complicated? Stateless. Okay, now I get it.
Yeah. I don't believe that it's that complicated. to manage the state of Terraform. Again, it's a pain, which is one of the reasons that I like Crossplane, but it's not a big enough pain to make you move to something like Bicep.
Yeah. Do you have a link to HomeLab for a HomeLab using Cluster API, or should we just start with a quick start?
Quick start.
That's for you.
Quick start.
Quick start.
I would recommend, if you're doing stuff, try the Cluster API operator. It's a different quick start, but the Cluster API operator, look it up on GitHub. It's awesome, and it allows you to do things declaratively instead of imperatively, using like cluster cuddle and things like that, which is to get started to test things. If you've never used Cluster API, all of that, try with cluster cuddle. That's the, let's say, blessed main approach, right? That all the testing is done, all of that. But when you actually go to like set something up, and once you've like understood Cluster API and all the resources in that, use the Cluster API operator, because it'll make it much easier, especially in a home lab where you want to be bring it up, tear it down, bring it up, tear it down at different points. Having it declarative is going to make that much easier for you to just nuke the lab and reinstall it and boom, install Flux CD, because you want to use a good GitOps controller and boom, like everything is up. Or, you know, use Argo for some reason. Both of them.
Now, here's a question for you, Scott. Why didn't you tell me that I sound like shit until now?
I didn't notice.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I switched to the mics. Now it should be fine. Tell me in the comments if it's not. Scott, what are you using for writing Crossplane compositions?
What am I using? My fingers on a keyboard. No. What am I using for writing Crossplane compositions? In the end, so I've tried the UXP tooling, like the Upbound developer experience stuff. I really like that. There's actually a proposal right now to bring that upstream into Crossplane itself, which I would love. When it comes to functions today, my number one function I'm using today is function Pythonic. Which I actually really like. It's the best function I've seen in the Crossplane ecosystem by far. And I'm not a Python fan at any level. It's just a really good function. And I have my own function YTT that I use because I do like YTT. I have some stuff in function KCL. And I also, when I'm like just quickly throwing something together, a lot of times I'll use Go templating. And the reason is because it's just easy. Go templating is super easy to do. I'm not a fan of it. I don't believe that it's good for production, but for a simple, just like getting started type thing, Go templating, because of the amount of Helm charts I've had to write in the past and things like that, it just comes naturally, to me. So, you know, I use a bunch of stuff. I have not gotten into the idea of doing like general purpose language functions, you know, Go-based functions and all of that, because I prefer to be able to see everything within the composition itself. I like looking at a composition and actually understanding what it's going to template out instead of just having a reference to, oh yeah, this thing does something and it outputs something. I like being able to see in the composition what that something is.
Okay, where are we? From Shamil. I need to replace my control plane cluster running both Argo and Crossplane. What is the best approach? I'm not sure I understand whether to replace Argo and Crossplane with something else or to
to replace the cluster. He needs to switch clusters.
Okay. Backup your resources and restore them in that cluster. Specifically, yeah, I mean, for XRs, you can be selective, but that can be painful. If you back them up and restore them, then afterwards, if you just plug in Argo, install Argo after that, point it to the same repository, and it will just continue working. But you need to back up and restore.
Right. Make sure to do the backup and restore of all resources except for Argo before Argo. Because otherwise Argo is going to start syncing down the manifests you have in Git to the cluster before and cause a bunch of havoc.
Exactly.
The general approach that I take in these cases when it's like planned is pause the reconciliation of everything in Argo with the relevant annotations. I think it is in Argo, at least in Flux, it's an annotation or a spec field. So whatever it is in your relevant tool, pause the reconciliation. If you want to be extra safe, you can kubectl get all of the crossplane resources, right? Get manage-o YAML, get composite-o YAML, get claim-o YAML, get all of those out. You can run like a JQ or YQ query against that to change the management policies to star, from star to, let's say, observed, apply it to the other cluster, make sure that nothing went wrong and that everything is fine, and then change it back to, full control, install Argo CD, unpause reconciliation, and everything is back up and running.
There we go.
Yeah.
From Mari, not a question, but nice talk on the backstage Governor Crossplane this week. Scott, you've been followed.
Thank you. Exactly. A platform engineering organization. We did a webinar this week.
Okay, what's your thoughts about KCP, Kubernetes, like control plane, CNCA project, especially in conjunction with Crossplane? I can answer for the Crossplane part, and you can extrapolate. It turned up to be very problematic, to be honest, especially on a large scale. So I'm not sure how far that will go, to be honest. It's a great idea. It's something that I was really looking forward to, but it's not looking good from the KCP perspective, to be more precise. It starts struggling very quickly.
Yeah. They also
and I'm not sure even where project is going. They forked it like 7 times so far, right?
Yeah, and then I forgot even what the name of the other project that came out of it that took like half of the work of like all the spaces things, and like it went in a bunch of different directions. It's just completely unclear to me what happened with that project. The idea was great, and I think that it just got right at lost interest. And then
I don't know specifically for KCP, but very often when situations like in KCP occur, that's very often because one or more companies start having trouble prioritizing their commercial ideas behind that project with where the project is going, and then we get those troubles. I'm not saying that that's the case in KCP, but that's often the case.
Yeah.
Kind of like, okay, so actually there are contributors outside of us, and we don't want this direction.
Right.
Because that's in conflict with wherever we want to go that is not official in the project and things like that.
Exactly. And I think that unfortunately KCP was one of those projects that when it came out, I'm like, ooh, this is awesome. Like, I'm really going to like love this. And then, yeah, it just kind of died down in my mind because it just never reached the potential that I thought it could have. I hope that it does. And I hope that it becomes a huge success, but currently I just don't see it.
Yeah. And I feel also that, I think that I extrapolated my dreams onto the project and misunderstood what it really should be or is meant to be. Because I imagine actually back in the day, KCP being something like a bare bones Kubernetes that you can use to build Kubernetes APIs without, it would be like kind of equivalent if Kubernetes would be Ubuntu, this would be like Alpine, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of stripped down version of Kubernetes, but yeah. I'm not sure that that's where it's going. Okay, when using Argo CD and I use the pull request generator and modify 3 repos, that means 3 PRs and temp apps.
3 temp apps.
What is a temp app?
Right, where it creates an app. It's basically using an app set with the pull request generator that on each pull request, it generates an app for the branch of that pull request. Right? You even did a video on this, Victor, where it does the like temporary environments, right? Ephemeral environments for a
okay.
Using the app set pull request generator is my understanding, at least.
Yeah. I must say that for ephemeral environments, I actually stopped using GitOps, to be honest. I think it's more trouble than good. And kind of because the benefits of GitOps are okay because it's a pull-based mechanism. It's more secure. You know what is happening, right? You can see the desired state and the evolution of the desired state and so on and so forth. I don't care about any of those things when I'm talking about something temporary, right? Ephemeral, whatever it is. I don't care. The only thing I care is how can I spin this up for this reason and shut it down as soon as possible. That's my only concern. And if it does not end up in Git, I have zero problems with that. Zero problems.
Yeah, and I simply don't know Argo CD well enough at all to tell you how. I'm not even sure what do you mean by to link them, the different apps. And for an app to call an app, I'm not sure exactly what that means. If you give a bit more info on what that means for app 1 to call app 2, I'm happy to try, but my knowledge in Argo CD is very rudimentary.
For new projects, should one be using Kubernetes Gateway API for Ingress these days?
Yes.
And yes, but I think it's a similar situation. Like if somebody asks me, should I use X, whatever X is, like YTT or KCL or anything else, instead of Helm? Imagine that was the question. My answer would still be yes, but with the note that does not mean that you're not going to use Helm also. And the same thing goes for Ingress. You will have third party that you need to expose outside of the cluster, and that third party might not support Gateway API. And then you have two choices. To just set Ingress over there, which is supported, or to start creating separate resources. Probably that third party is Helm chart. So separate resources can install this Helm chart and then create separately this Gateway API resource and try to figure out what it should connect to. So I think it's so much trouble to go 100%. For all your apps, yes.
Exactly. 100% agree.
Hey guys, glad to see you back, Scott. Thoughts on Haiku 4.5? From my experience, the output speed is amazing. However, it doesn't follow rules and is fixated on one thing without considering context. Depends what you're doing. I'm very, very, very impressed with Haiku, to be honest. I don't use Haiku when I write code, but I do use Haiku almost exclusively now for any operations. Like, hey, go and do this and that. It's simply lightning fast. It's cheap. It's good. Maybe it's kind of slightly less reliable than Sonnet. So if you ask me kind of like, what should I use? No money object, and I have all the time in the world than Sonnet. But if you want it faster or if you want it cheaper, Haiku is not that far. Not far at all.
Yeah. I use Haiku when almost everything that it's doing is calling MCP tools, and it's doing very little logic on its own.
Exactly.
Or it's just shelling out something on my system, right? In those cases, the answer is that I use Haiku 4.5 because it is cheap and it's good. It's very good at tool calling because it still is an Anthropic model, and they are still the best at tool calling of any of the models. But I have found it to be very annoying when it does coding, because I think I completely agree. It does get caught up. It does not follow instructions well. But like for coding, because it loses its context, it seems much quicker than something like Sonnet does. But for the short tasks where I just need to do something and it's logical, simple, just procedural, it's great.
In the cloud, like let's say some months ago, if you turn on the plan mode in Cloud Code, it would use Opus for heavy lifting, and then it would execute that plan afterwards with Sonnet 4.
Yeah.
Now, actually, they changed it because Sonnet 4.5 is better than Opus, or at least just as good. And Haiku is very close to or similar to Sonnet 4. So actually now in Cloud Code, if you enable plain mode, it will do Sonnet, and then it switches to Haiku for. And
it switches to Haiku for coding.
Yes, I mean if you enable it like that, yes, because before it was you had plain mode that would be Sonnet and then switch to Opus switch to Sonnet 4.
Right.
Now plain mode is actually Sonnet 4.5 instead of Opus and Haiku. And I agree that it's not just as good, but also I found that I'm actually willing to have. I never run agents autonomously, just to be clear. Kind of when I write code, I'm behind the wheel. And there is some value also in maybe making slightly more mistakes, but being faster. Because if I can iterate faster, it's not that Sonnet never makes mistakes, right?
Right.
I can get there maybe sometimes even faster with Haiku.
Yeah, I think the nice thing with it is also where I've used Haiku is I have done unattended coding in very simple use cases where I am never going to actually use that code. It's throwaway code. But I will use it if I want to prototype, and I'm not sure which of these 4 approaches I want to go down when I'm building something. I will throw 4 agents out there with Haiku and say, hey, do this, hey, you do this, you do this, you do this. Throw out 4 different approaches that I'm thinking of. Let Haiku write it because it's cheap and it's quick. I get that first example up there. I see them. My process is I immediately throw 2 out. The 2 best ones, I go and do another round of iteration on them, see which one I like, throw away all the code, but I've decided which approach I want, go to the actual code base and use Sonnet to do the actual work. But that way it allows me to prototype very quickly what I want, which approach is the right approach for what I'm doing, and then use Sonnet for the actual coding itself. And that is never unattended. That I'm always at any code that I'm going to keep is attended and I'm behind the wheel.
Actually, there is in my case, story behind it that the few days before Haiku was released, I started working on evals, right? I wanted to see how certain operations I'm doing with AI, how much better or worse they perform based on many different criteria using 9 different models. Then I thought, it would be nice to have 10. Like it's such a nice round figure. Kind of like let's have it with 10 models. And I received at that very moment kind of notification, hey, Anthropic released Haiku. And I immediately discarded it, kind of like, okay, I know Haiku from before, kind of this is going to be very fast, very cheap, but it's not going to be any good. I'm never going to use it. But let me put it there in evals.
Right.
And man, it's good. It's kind of like right below Sonnet. It's based on those
right
evals.
Below Sonnet 4. Right below Sonnet 4, not
4.5. Below 0.5.
It's below Sonnet 4.
In how well it does.
Yeah. It's just below Sonnet 4.
Yeah, if you include cost into it, yes. I was not talking about exclusively quality. If you include cost in evaluation, it's just below, right. It's above Sonnet 4.5, yes.
Yeah.
But what is to be so impressive is that we can now discuss how much better or worse it is, but something like Haiku being better than many other models over there, which I'm not going to name, is just insane. Anyway, next one. How do you properly abstract the platform underlying details from app developers?
Crossplane.
If the question is technology, then yes, crossplane, 100%. That's the answer. Now, if the question is how you define those interfaces, what interfaces will be, I mean, exact specification, I don't have the answer, but I know what is not the answer, and that's you trying to figure it out. Ask the developers.
Yes.
Ask them, what do you need?
Exactly.
I still don't understand how many people try to build something like that by thinking that they know what everybody needs.
Right.
And every single startup that tried that approach failed so far.
Right. talk to the developers first. That doesn't mean that what the developer says is what is going to be 100%, because once, for example, when you go to a developer and say, okay, you need to create, whatever, a database. What type of information do you have? Like, what type of interface would you want for this? And say, all we care about is having these 4 input fields. That's all we want to supply. Great. You then go to your DBA, right, who's going to go and write this service and who's actually offering the database as a service. And he says, yeah, but these other settings I have to do, I need this other information from the end user in order for me to be able to make that logical decision of A or B. And there's going to be some additional information they need to put in, or there's going to be whatever it is. The one thing that I think is very important and that I see people fail at consistently is do not think that your users know the underlying terms and therefore do not feel tied to using the spec of let's say you're doing a deployment, okay? I promise you that developers are not dealing with max surge and max unavailable and all of these different things, okay? Say rollout percentage, rollout strategy, right? Come up with some term that makes sense to them with them. Do not feel like you have to mirror the API to be exactly what you have there. Instead of host, which I still hate that name in an ingress, have FQDN if that's what your developers are used to, because give me the FQDN. Great. Why does it need to be ingress hostname or host? If you put FQDN, if you put ingress hostname, that's going to be really stupid down the road when you're using gateway API and not ingress. And then you just leak the fact that it's ingress in the front end. If you put FQDN, that works in anything that you end up doing. Do a service type load balancer with external DNS, creating a DNS record, that can still be FQDN. You do ingress, you do gateway API, don't leak abstractions.
Okay, TTT, any update on the graduation of the Crossplane project? It's almost there. It's in the final phase. It might happen for Atlanta, it might not, but it's around the corner. Now, I think that all the paperwork is done. Yeah. All the confirmations.
It's all done. The due diligence was done, and it's up for public review right now. So go to the GitHub issue and give it a thumbs up, or to the PR, give it a thumbs up, from the community. It's in community review right now, basically, but it's gone through already the due diligence and all of that. It goes through the community review process, and then there will be the actual voting of the steering committee. So, yeah, it's really exciting.
Okay. Oh, which will you recommend, Crossplane or Cluster API? Both. Mm-hmm. I feel like, correct me, Scott, there are some overlaps, but they're essentially very different.
Exactly. And especially now that
both manage resources outside of the cluster where they're running. That's correct. The overlap.
Exactly. Well, what I will say is that, especially in Crossplane V2, the answer is both of them together. In Crossplane V1, wrapping cluster API objects under the Kubernetes provider's object resources inside of a Crossplane composition to do that was not fun. But now that Crossplane V2 allows us to compose native Kubernetes resources, or any Kubernetes resource, even if it's not a managed resource of Crossplane, the answer is I have compositions that compose cluster API resources, and it works great. I think the integration of the two is awesome. Let each one do what it's really good at. Crossplane is good at composing resources. Cluster API is great at managing the lifecycle of Kubernetes clusters.
Okay, now we go to the sad subjects. Eric, KCP seemed to be quiet for a while, and recently I'm seeing a few videos pop up regarding it. Now, I haven't seen those videos. I don't know what they are. But while Scott was talking a moment ago, I went there to double check that there wasn't something special, and there isn't. The last release was made in April this year, right? And I haven't checked the release, but I would bet in anything that it's not significant. Actually, it is significant. but there hasn't been anything since August, and it's not moving very fast anymore. So I would love, KCL is my favorite language for that type of stuff.
No, this is KCP. He's writing about
KCP. I'm an idiot. I'm talking about KCL. KCP. Yeah, KCP I'm not following. I don't know. That's wishful thinking on my side, kind of like that's
exactly.
I want KCL to come back. Okay, KCP I'm not following. I don't know if you're following it closely, Scott.
Not following it again. It's dead basically. From what I know, again, I'm happy to see if there are videos popping up and all of that. I hope that means that it's getting rejuvenated. Hopefully it succeeds at being what its initial mission was. If it does, I'm super behind the idea. So
Me too.
Yeah.
What would be a great kind of if they would, all those people who make forks, if they could get together back, kind of like like a rock band when they separate and then they make a comeback and say, okay, we made a mistake.
Exactly.
That would be awesome. Opinions on cargo from Acuity. I haven't used it in a while. Back in the day when I did use it, opinions were not very rosy from my side. I did not really like it that much. And I'm pretty sure that Scott couldn't care less because it's Argo CD.
Again, my opinion on this is that I'm glad that there are tools that are trying to bring the next phase where GitOps needs to evolve to in this area of actually doing promotions in the context of GitOps, doing actual good promotion flows. That is an area that needs to be solved. However, tying a promotion tool to a specific GitOps controller, in my mind, is a horrifying idea. I understand the people at Acuity were the people that started Argo, and therefore they think I don't care. If the Argo promoter, whatever it's called in Argo CD, they also have the new promotion thing that they built in. I get that. You're an Argo project. Of course you're going to work with Argo. Like, that's fine. But if you're a third-party open source project, you should not be tying yourself into one implementation of GitOps.
100%. And here's my question then. If you're tying it to Argo CD, why is that not Argo CD then? Exactly. Right? Kind of. Right. If you would tell me now, Scott, okay, I just built a new tool that works only exclusively and forever and ever with Flux, I would expect that project to be in Flux.
Exactly.
Kind of why not? Why is it a separate project then? Right? Kind of if it works only as Flux.
Exactly. And that made me, yes, and I still tried it because it was the first tool in this area that really popped up. I tried it. It was full of so many bugs and whatever, and I didn't like a lot of the small things at that point that I threw it out, and I have not looked at it again. And I keep looking to see if they've done anything to decouple themselves from Argo. It seems that they keep coupling themselves more and more to Argo. If at some point they disconnect themselves from Argo, I will look at it also in the context of Argo. No problems with that, but I will not use a tool. If I'm going to do promotions in the Argo world, I'm going to use the Argo CD promotion tool and not a tool that is not part of the project.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
From Shamil, thank clarification. Now the end is the question. I was just wondering whether Crossplane can lose some state. Now, the important thing is that Crossplane could not care less about the state. There is only one thingy that it cares about, and that's whether the ID of the resource that you're managing is what it is. Right? Now, that ID sometimes is the same as the name you put it. So if you create the GKE cluster and you call it right now Victor, you don't need the ID because the ID is Victor. Google GKE gives it ID that is the same as the name you declared. Now you have some providers, which I'm not going to name. They just start with A and end up with WS. That happen
With
to
nothing in the middle.
that happen to have a bunch of resources where you cannot assign ID in advance, right? So if you create a VPC, you can name it as much as you want. It's still going to get randomly generated UUID or whatever the naming schema is. So Crosspoint does not know that something there randomly named is what you call it.
Yep.
And then it adds a label external name to the resource. Now, in theory, if you could, I'm not saying you should do this, but if you would restore with Argo CD into your cluster resources, but disable reconciliation so that Crossplane does not try to do anything. And then afterwards you change that ID to what it was supposed to be, it will work. And then enable reconciliation again, right? It will work.
The only thing that matters is that annotation in the spec. The spec is already in Git, and all you should need to care about is that annotation. But unfortunately, there are no tools that will sync that up somehow and make that cross-cluster the annotation, and therefore you are required to do a backup restore of Crossplane resources.
What would be kind of awesome to have a mini project that would somehow update have some kind of array of IDs in your XR and update your Git after it's reconciled. But even that wouldn't work because in theory...
But it wouldn't work because it's the managed resources that need that annotation.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have those IDs afterwards, your XRD can when it creates resources, create it with the annotation instead of...
Right, you'd have to add that logic into your functions.
Yeah. But even that wouldn't be bulletproof because there is nothing guaranteeing that VPC with that ID will not for some reason get destroyed, and then justly so Crosspoint will create a new one and then it will change again, right? So outside of that, can it lose? And it lose, literal meaning of the word, it can lose as much as kube control etcd can lose, right? In theory, maybe. I never saw it happen.
Yeah.
In light of AWS outage and seeing that even AWS control planes have single point of failures and even large profitable companies struggling to have effective HIDR, do you think HI is worth the cost? 100%. It's definitely worth the cost.
Okay. The fact that DNS resolution between data centers in the global data center of AWS went down, and it only affected that region and didn't have rippling effects for other regions, is the proof that HA is extremely amazing. Now, the fact that there is from AWS such a high reliance on US East 1, that is something that, more safeguards need to be put in place on that, I believe. And I believe with the amount of money that they lost over those hours, yes. But
that does not mean that there is, for each of those examples, there are probably dozens or hundreds or thousands of examples where actually you did not even have the outage because of HA. Like, if you're using AWS, let's say that you're using EKS, I see no good reason not to have it in different zones. Kind of like that, I cannot imagine a reason unless it's a single node cluster.
Money.
Okay, money, yes. Okay, but I mean, assuming that you care at least a little bit about HA.
Right. No, nothing that is in production should ever not be multi-AZ. Period, end of story. Yeah. Nothing in production.
We can have a long conversation whether you should do multi-region, but multi-AZ always.
Correct.
Hey guys, Victor, after I don't know how much time since your video about Crow ditching Helm, have there been any improvements and has your opinion changed since then? I haven't been closely watching it last month, so I don't know where exactly Crow is today.
They have made some improvements. They have. They just made a big move to server-side apply in 0.5. So they're using apply sets now instead of client-side apply. So that solves a lot of issues. They're still running through a bunch of issues, right? They still don't have like loop support, right? Like for statements. They're still missing a lot of functionality. But yes, it is getting closer to something that actually is usable in my mind. All I can say is after Crossplane V2, I do not see where Crow is supposed to fit. Because the reason I liked Crow initially was because it had namespace scoped resources. So does Crossplane now.
I simply thought back then, and unless something drastically changed, I'm pretty sure that I think it right now. That is that Crow ran into the same mistake that Crossplane made long time ago, and that's that YAML does not get you far.
Yep.
Right? Kind of you just mentioned, Scott, loops, right? Can you add mechanism into YAML to have some form of loops? Yes. Will it be even uglier than it was before? Yes.
Yes.
Will there be a request of some other logic to be added after the loops? Yes.
Yes.
And two things can happen there. One, that over time you end up creating a monster like YAML that simply makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Or the option number two, which is where I think Crossplane got at some point, is saying, okay, enough. Kind of like, if you want YAML, cool, use YAML, but we need to enable non-YAML support.
Exactly. I think that's a huge part. I think that they even hit the barrier quicker than Crossplane does because they also aren't using Open API schema as my definition. They're using simple schema, which is way more limited than Open API schema. So even what I can define as my API is way more limited because they've done even a slimmer API than what Crossplane ever had, making it even more limiting. I think my biggest issue with Crow from an architectural perspective actually isn't necessarily that, although I do have that issue. It's the fact that they have built the whole system around a DAG, right? The direct to quick graph.
I don't get it.
Which is basically Terraform, right? Now, again, DAGs are great. They make sense. Where they don't make sense is in Kubernetes. The Kubernetes ecosystem is an eventually consistent control loop-based mechanism. And having the DAG system as, again, in Crossplane, I can mimic a DAG. I can do that today with functions. And in the very edge use cases where I actually need to do it, I do. But that is the exception to the rule and should not be the rule. And having a tool built that goes against one of what, in my mind, are the principles of the Kubernetes methodology, I don't like.
There is one place where I think actually Crossplane would benefit greatly from DAG, and that's on deletion.
Yes. By the way, have you used function Pythonic, Victor?
No, not yet.
You know why I like it? They can auto-generate the usages for you based off of passing
parameters. I know.
One another.
That's so bloody awesome, yes.
Meaning it does the deletion DAG for you. Because the usages are your way of creating the DAG, and it will auto-generate usages for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That is why I moved to using them, because for deletion, DAG is great. For creation, it should never be there.
Well, we are over the hour, And we have a couple of questions we haven't answered and we will not answer because we passed the hour. But most likely, very likely, we'll be here next Thursday. And then you come and then copy those answers and paste them at the very beginning, and then we'll surely answer them. Thank you so much for being with us. See you soon.